Thank you, Robert, and you.
Good to see you. Take a
Appreciate
seat there.
being here. Thanks.
Good to see you. So, I shared this yesterday, and I'll repeat it because I think it's very important. We spoke about connection. We spoke about culture. We spoke about what's next. And my colleague Rossa spoke about experience. And could I just share my experience of NASA with you?
Absolutely.
I have never had, like, we see this brand, right? And you went to a school yesterday. Yeah.
Did.
We split the NASA team into two teams, went to two different schools. I had the privilege of going to one of them. The kids in the schoolyard were chanting, NASA, NASA. The excitement was outrageous. The questions were hilarious from the kids. It was truly, truly fascinating to observe the young children and their view of this space exploration, NASA, and we know the magic of it. But my experience has been a very warm experience and consistent with every single person. And quite often it's easy for us to say, NASA's NASA. We're not NASA. People say that to you quite often, I'm sure. But the consistency of experience and warmth, I've never experienced it from any other organization. And I, like the kids, think there's something magical about that culture. And I'd like to uncover that with you.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Your purpose. We know the story. JFK walking into NASA, guy sweeping. What is it you do? You know the story? I help put people on the moon. Is that the purpose we all aspire to have with all of our folks? I want to ask you, Jane, how has that purpose evolved over the last 2 years?
Sure.
And how do you reflect on it?
Actually, I think the purpose became the foundation for keeping us a healthy and vibrant organization over the last 2 years. And what I mean by that is, all the norms that we were used to and how we worked and how we dealt with each other sort of went out the window because we were all distributed at our homes, staying safe. I will point out that our administrators, both then and now, have both said the singular most important thing is people's health and safety. And that was the driving sort of force behind decisions that were made, especially in 2020, about how we were going to make sure that we were safe, i.e. that we were going to disband and go to our individual homes and stay safe. So, however, given that that was the case, the mission was still the mission. And so what it did is it gave us something to rally around, quite honestly. And interestingly, we did some amazing things in the 2 years of the pandemic. So these were missions that had been planned for, years, sometimes decades. Think about it. We launched humans from American soil on an American rocket for the first time since the shuttle program ended in 2011. Okay, so that had been years in the planning, and that happened. We did two. We did Demo 2 and Crew 1. We also sent another rover to Mars. We launched it. It landed on Mars. We launched the James Webb Space Telescope, which will be the counterpart to the Hubble Space Telescope, which is a very famous telescope that has done wonders to our understanding of the universe. And that also happened successfully. So all of these long-standing programs were coming to fruition in this 2-year period. And so it was exciting, not just for us, but for the nation and the world. And so what it did was it gave us that anchor, that way to really believe that though lots of things in our lives were not the same, and there was a great deal of uncertainty, nonetheless, that was true. That kept us true. And so it became sort of the foundation for us to feel that we were still an organization, to remember our purpose every day. Interestingly enough, with my human capital organization, we actually did some very specific things in the time period to ensure that, to your point about the famous story of the janitor, that we, as a business function, nonetheless felt just as invested and just as excited. So we had the commercial crew program folks come and talk to our function and do a Q&A and talk about the role of human capital in allowing those programs to go forward. We actually got launch watch parties together so that the people could gather in their homes and using a collaborative software to really actually experience it together and share the excitement. So we'd be texting each other, can you believe it? I'm holding my breath, et cetera, et cetera. So it really was a way to believe in something that was going to remain true.
Belief.
Yes.
So if belief is guided by values,
Yes.
so which of your organizational values do you think have been stressed most this last 2 years, and which have really stood up when needed most?
I would say the value of resilience has been stressed. I mean, I don't want to take away from the difficulties experienced just in day-to-day living, and also a great deal of loss. I mean, we lost people from our NASA family, as is the case with, I'm sure, every organization on the planet, and every family has been touched in some way by it. So the resilience to remember that though we experience loss, we still keep going, and that there are still, we call ourselves the NASA family, by the way. That's a
big family.
It's a big family, but we're the NASA family, and it really feels like a family. So there's a sort of support system around you, even if you are experiencing some amount of personal tragedy, which was amazing. Our tagline is people first, mission always. And so the people first, I think, was in addition to the belief in the mission, was kind of the way in which we helped each other with the stressors of uncertainty, the need to reach deep down inside yourself and find that resilience to be able to keep going. Not just with loss, but also, I've got kids crawling over my lap, and I have to try to do work, and the schools are closed, and I can't do things.
Take them off.
So, but yeah, I think it was the people orientation, the value of inclusion and teamwork, and those things that we hold dear that sound kind of like they might be empty, but are not at all empty for us. And we stood with each other, I would say.
I think that's an interesting observation. I think when I think about what you've gone through, you effectively had a monopoly in the United States for your sector. Now there's been major competition, collaboration, and the private sector development.
Yes.
Pinched your staff. There's a whole new way of thinking, I know, around how your kind of talent flows from your side into private sector. But that has forced you guys to think very differently about dealing with more complex problems.
Yes.
So NASA deals on the fringes of what's commercially unviable.
Yes.
That's an interesting space to occupy, isn't it? So that leads you deeper into making the impossible become possible. And if we're facing into a lot of challenges as we look to kind of reconfigure our work and our people and workplace, we've big decisions to make. And NASA are famous for dealing with complexity and making critical decisions. Do you have any principles around decision making that works effectively in NASA that we can pinch from you?
I would say that we talk a lot about risk and risk management. So decisions are anchored on what level of risk there is and how it is that we would manage that risk. And we don't enter into decisions quickly or lightly. We're very deliberative about how we operate in the agency. Part of that's because of the space that we are in, I can say that. But also, as things get more complex around us, to your point about the fact that we have partners, and we do occasionally think of them as competitors for some of the talent that we have, but I would say we really think of them as partners. They are our partners, and they are enabling with us more and more complex things in the world of space. So, and this has been true in our science missions, it's true in our aeronautics missions, now in human spaceflight with this decision to go back to the moon and from the moon onto Mars. I mean, in building ways to stay alive on the moon and stay alive in Mars. I mean, just the number of things you have to think about, the architecture of how you will go and how you will build and how you will use resources that are there to help keep humans alive. is really quite extraordinary, and we know that we can't do it alone. So the decisions that we make about what to do and when to do them have to factor in the capabilities that are around us in these other organizations and what's working and what's not. And I would say that there's an enormous amount of excitement about the possibilities now that we actually have a bigger ecosystem around us. There's not just the big players that everyone has heard of, but there are a lot of startups in the industry. So there's a lot of innovation going on around us. And so part of the decision making is, what of that impacts the work that we need to do, and what is left over that industry won't pick up, or at least not yet, that become the very hardest problems that we need to solve.
And interesting, just looking at your talent strategy and looking at, again, the power of your brand.
Yes.
It's quite cool. It's quite cool, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a very cool brand. So you probably have the opposite challenge to many of us, perhaps, in dealing with kind of floods of applications. And again, there's an old story of a hiring manager and a HR manager sitting down, and in the days it was like paper piles and trying to deal with the applications, And you're known for incredible talent in the org. The hiring manager says, I'll deal with this, I'll go through it, grabs the pile of paper, starts leafing through it with his fingers like this. The HR person was astounded, because that's a really interesting way to assess talent, He goes, yeah, no problem, I'm just getting there, we'll have a shortlist, no problem. Yeah, picks it up, throws the pile, most of the pile into the bin. HR person, you can't do that. You're breaking every HR rule in the book there. Would you hire somebody that unlucky? Lucky people get to join NASA.
Yes.
How do you assess for potential if you're evolving your supply chains? And how do you look to select the sharpest people, and what do you personally look for on the softer skill side?
So let me just start by framing the talent acquisition world at NASA.
Sure.
It'll be helpful. We employ about 18,000 civil servants. We also have contractors who do work with us and actually form a pipeline into our civil service positions.
Okay.
So that's one way in which we are very knowledgeable and familiar with the potential candidates for our roles. And if and when we select people from those pipelines, they really hit the ground running because they're very familiar with how NASA operates. We have a very low attrition rate at NASA, and it's because people love the mission. And
Is that a problem?
It's generally a wonderful thing.
It's very diplomatic.
Yes, generally. I do believe there's something known as too low an attrition rate, and I think sometimes we are there. We're about 4%, 3 or 4%, which means that why would you dislike the idea that people are staying because they love what they do? I mean, it's a great thing. But in terms of diversity and being able to bring in new skills, we have more limited opportunities to do that. We do a lot of growing from within. So the pipelines of some of the contractor firms and the personnel who work for us, they apply for jobs, they compete. And but we also, there's a lot of internal mobility. There's more that we need to do there. And so from a human capital perspective, I think strategically, that is an area that should take as much of our attention as just acquiring from external sources. We are trying to leverage some of the advantages or the silver linings, I should say, of the pandemic, where, in fact, we might be more geographically agnostic than we might have been in the past for some of our roles. That allows us to pick people who may or may not need to be near our field centers for all of the work that they do. So we have a bigger marketplace, if you will. And so that leads to your question about, well, how do we go there? We do actually use assessment tools. We do...
The fingers through the piles?
No.
You have your own?
No, but what we're really looking for, I mean, once you look through the technical assessment and set that aside for a second, I think we are looking for versatility. I think we're looking for commitment to some higher purpose, and I think we're looking for curiosity. And I find that the people at NASA who really thrive have those sorts of attributes. That sounds maybe like I'm glossing over it, but it's real. And last but not least, we need people who have a people orientation. People first, mission always. And this idea that as you grow in a career at NASA, and you may many times go into some sort of lead or supervisory relationship, how you do that and doing that well matters a lot to our agency.
Yeah.
So you do want your technical specialists, but you want to grow people horizontally as well as vertically, and then you want them to be able to collaborate as a team member. I mean, we do projects. We have engineering organizations who are matrix to different projects in a month, in a year, in a career. They will work on a lot of different things. So you're bringing together people to work projects who may or may not have worked with each other in past projects. And so it's really important that you can bring together project teams and that they can actually work well and well quickly. So there's a collaborative piece of this.
There's a piece as well we spoke about before, Jane, and again, I've used it and it's truly transformative. I learned it from my engagement with you guys, and that's assuming positive intent.
Yes.
Like, to assume positive intent in everybody, it's a real transformative enabler to simply get things done. And again, it embeds trust. It's based from a baseline of trust.
Yes.
And you can have very solid candor in feedback to propel and go forward. We have 30 seconds. I have one final question, if you don't mind, Jane.
Not at all.
What's next for the role of the CPO, and what do you think is next for your HR function, and what will change over the course of the next 2 years?
So for me and my staff, I think that there is a bit of a shift in what I might call the arrangement that we have with our workforce for blending both their career needs and their personal needs with the requirements of the work, which is what I think this whole remote work and COVID experience has taken us to. And there's a little tension in the system. What does the work require? And does that require me to be in a place or work at a specific time or work in a specific way? And I think we're entering into this era where we're having to figure out how to balance both of those things in a way that keeps us as strong as we have been. I feel like we're almost putting the pieces back together again. It's not going to be quick. We've dubbed an experimental phase of about 6 months where we're just saying, hey, we're going to get some stuff wrong. It's okay. And so let's give ourselves the grace to try things out and not have to be perfect.
Well said.
And that's part of the assume good intent. I try something, it doesn't work. I say it doesn't work, we try something else. So I think that I'm overseeing that. I want to make sure the voice of the workforce is really present. We are measuring how well it's going, and that we are making course corrections as we need.
Very good.
So.
And course corrections up with innovation yesterday. Lauren and Ross from PHI said sometimes innovating is just stopping, doing something.
Yeah?
Yeah. Jane, I'd spent all day speaking with you. You would not spend all day speaking with me, so I let you off the hook. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me and thank Jane Datta. Thank you, Jane. So
Thank
much.
you, Robert.
Thank
Great
you.
talking to you.
Yes.